He's collaborated with the likes of Kevin Gates and Boozy Badass. His songs were climbing the charts of Billboard, and by all accounts, his career was only going up. Then he was gunned down in broad daylight on a busy Texas highway. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Now, the shooting was nearly 5 years ago, but just last week, police made a shocking announcement. They've arrested another Dallas rapper in connection to the case, accusing him of setting up the murder. But the question still remains as to why. For this case, we have to go back to 2020, November 11th of that year to be exact. Melvin Noble was heading north on Interstate 35 in Dallas, Texas, a road I myself have taken plenty of times. This was just before noon, so lots of people are traveling along that highway. Then suddenly, someone approaches Melvin's car. Now, before I get more into it, you might not know Melvin Noble by that name. You might know him better as Mo3. So someone approaches Mo3's car, but not just anyone, a masked gunman. According to police, Mo got out of his car and ran. Then he was hit by several bullets. Now remember, this is a busy highway that for the most part is locked in and no way really to escape. Mo died from his injuries, and a bystander inside another car was hit as well, but survived. Now the imagery, kind of hard to get out of your head. I mean, it's an ambush-style attack on a highway, a bystander is hit. It's a lot, right? So the next question that had to be answered, who did it? Well, that answer came a month later when homicide detectives arrested a 22-year-old believed to be responsible for Mo3's murder. And that person was Kiwan White. He actually was taken into federal custody for possessing a firearm by a convicted felon, but also charged with murder. Kiwan ended up pleading guilty on the gun charge and is currently serving a 9-year sentence. But that murder charge is still open. But the story doesn't end there. When Kiwan was arrested, it was reported that he had ties to another Dallas rapper, Markies Conway, better known as Yella Beezy. Yella Beezy and Mo3 were somewhat immersed in a feud with one another right before Mo3's death. But at the time, Yella wasn't accused or even criminally charged in connection to Mo3's murder. Then another arrest was made 5 months after the shooting. So this is April of 2021. Devin Maurice Brown was also indicted on murder. Devin reportedly contacted a witness multiple times trying to find where Mo3 was on the day of the shooting. According to police, records show numerous calls between Devin and Kiwan on the day before the shooting and the day of. But Kiwan reportedly denied he even knew Devin or had any association with him. So by April of 2021, 2 people are arrested for Mo3's murder. And as you likely guessed it, the story still doesn't end there. Nearly 4 years after Devin's arrest, another arrest is made. Now remember how I mentioned Yella Beezy and Mo3 had beef before Mo was killed? Well, according to police, he set up the whole murder, even allegedly paying Kiwan White money to carry out the ambush attack. Police are keeping pretty tight-lipped on the full extent of Yella Beezy's alleged involvement in Mo3's murder. But if I personally had to guess, it might stem from the beef the two had right before Mo3's death. It's not out of the realm of possibility. We've seen it in other cases, right? So what was the feud really about? Well, you can trace it back years earlier, when Mo3's friend Roy Lee was shot and killed in North Dallas in 2018. He reportedly questioned Yella Beezy's claim on Oak Cliff, a neighborhood in Dallas. Doesn't seem to be a big deal to some, but to others, it's a sign of disrespect to openly question that. Well, Roy Lee was later shot at a shopping center. Then he died from complications from the shooting. A day after Roy Lee died, Yella Beezy was shot 8 times during a drive-by, but survived that shooting. In between that, Mo3 and Yella taunted one another in diss tracks. In January of 2020, Mo3's manager claimed Yella and his crew attacked him when he was leaving a club in Dallas. Then 10 months later, Mo3 was killed on I-35 in Dallas. But again, Yella Beezy wasn't arrested or even charged in connection to Mo3's death until 2025. And Yella Beezy isn't just charged with murder, but capital murder, meaning if convicted, that's life in prison with no chance of parole. Or it could even mean the death penalty. A big thank you to Odoo for sponsoring us. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. Now, one of my favorites is Odoo's website builder. With their drag and drop features and AI copywriter, it helps me come up with website descriptions, like the site I built for my cat Buttons. It was easy to set up, and just a couple minutes later, I now have buttonsthecat.com. So again, a huge thank you to Odoo for sponsoring our news stories, and you can build your website now as well. The domain is free for the first year when you use our link, odoo.com/lcnewsweb. Again, that's odoo.com/lcnewsweb for your free domain for your first year. I'm joined now by Texas-based criminal defense attorney Bridget Williams. Bridget, it's always great to see you, and thank you so much for joining me. Before we get into the allegations against Yella Beezy, take me back to November of 2020. What was your reaction to Mo3's murder, especially the scene of it being in the middle of I-35, but what was your reaction to his murder and just the ambush style of it?
I think you just stated it perfectly. Something that happens like that in broad daylight on the interstate in Dallas is just something that is shocking. So I-35 is one of our busiest interstates here in Dallas, not just in Dallas, but in the state of Texas. And so this particular incident happened not on the interstate, but on the feeder road, which is right next to it, which is also very busy. And so what happened in this particular situation was the vehicle that stopped in front of Mo3 stopped. The person got out of the vehicle, ambushed him with a gun, running towards him, and shot him. He got out of the car running, right, and he was shot as in the back. And so something like that happening at any time is going to be insane and crazy. But happening in broad daylight in the middle of the day is something that is very much so disturbing and something that is not expected.
Not expected in the slightest. And in your opinion, back then in 2020, we're in the midst of COVID, all of that sort. Was there any type of whispering kind of going on in Dallas about who might have been involved back then in Mo3's murder?
I would say that there was definitely some whispering. There's a lot of people discussing these back and forth with both of these individuals on multiple podcasts, on multiple television shows, multiple, if just media. This discussion was going on because apparently this particular back and forth or controversy had been going on for some time. So this wasn't something that was that they didn't know that there was some type of controversy going on, but this particular just killing in broad daylight, I think that is something still to be surprised about.
Yeah, and it's always disheartening, especially too, because these were both rappers by both accounts, all up and coming, could have gotten to a great point in their music career, into their rap career, but then something like this, where it feels like you can't really leave the streets behind. Something like this happens, and now you have one person dead and another accused of murder for hire. With that being said, what was your reaction to Yella Beezy's arrest just last week?
I mean, you said that so well. Just this is just something that can halt a person's career substantially. So one person being killed, dying, and another person being charged with this capital murder case. Capital murder is the highest level of a charge that can possibly go forward. The person faces life in prison without parole or the death penalty. So you are facing pretty much the top consequences that our state has to offer in something like this. So this is a very, very serious offense, and so it's a sad situation for both parties.
Absolutely. And why do you think, Yella Beezy wasn't arrested until this year? Mo3 was shot and killed back in 2020. Their feud seemingly widely known, kind of going on even before that. Then they arrested the trigger person just a month later. But why Yella Beezy's arrest nearly 5 years after Mo3 was shot and killed?
So the thing is that on murder cases, there is no statute of limitations. And so the police department has the opportunity to do a thorough investigation. And I actually prefer that they do that. Do all of the research that you possibly can, interview everyone that you possibly can. And that way you make sure that you bring forth the case against the right person. And so it's not unlikely, it's very common actually for cases to be brought years later on cases that don't have a statute of limitations. Other cases, other felony cases may have a 5 year, 10-year statute of limitations, but some don't have one at all. And then in that situation, it's not unlikely for that person to be arrested and a case to be brought against them at a later point.
And I kind of want to go back to your point earlier. We were talking just about kind of what might be behind this murder and kind of what led up to it, but also in the investigation, it taking so many years just to get to an arrest of the person who is accused of orchestrating that. But it seems that we're seeing more and more of these cases of rappers accused of murder for hire. We've seen it in the Lil Durk case. We've seen it to some extent in the Big U case. Now we're seeing it again in Yella Beezy's case. And one thing that kind of also lingers amongst all those cases is just that people talk, and they talk on podcasts, and they talk on video, not necessarily admitting, hey, I done it, hey, I did this, but it kind of helps piece together things that investigators can later use down the line. What's your reaction to just people being, in a way, open, but also closed, but you can kind of read between the lines, and investigators are sitting there watching these types of things happen, and they're probably going to use this as evidence against that person. But what's your reaction, especially in a case like this?
You're 110% correct. I mean, we've seen in multiple cases before where police officers and district attorneys, prosecutors have used song lyrics or statements made on a podcast or statements made on different platforms in a trial setting. They've used that in the investigation, but even further down in the trial. And so everything that you say on a public platform can be used against you or for you, right? It can be used in your case. And so I think that's something that people have to take into account. But once you release it out on a public platform, it's just like if you try to throw something in the trash, right? You threw it out, but that still can be used in your case, used against you. You thought that you may have thrown it out and it was used years ago, and then somebody comes back, recovers that now, and that can still be used against you. So it's just something for everyone to be mindful of things that they put out, and to be mindful of that it can come back to haunt you or help you.
Especially if it's years ago. People think that, oh, it's just lost, in whatever digital landscape that it may be. But no, it's still there. It's still on the internet. People can still pull it up. Investigators can still use it against you. And it feels like we might see that coming to trial. Now, when it comes to trial, I would assume that the defense attorney is going to hope to get the diss records out, the diss songs out, and just kind of everything that might kind of paint that picture of a motive. But in your opinion, what will the defense be in a case like this, especially if it goes to trial?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point. Like, if it goes to trial, I we don't know if it will or not. At this point, we've just entered into the beginning phases of this, of where he's being arrested. I know people say, "Well, it's been 5 years. Is how is it still the beginning phase?" It is the beginning phase because the arrest just occurred. So the arrest occurred, and then now there is what we call just pre-litigation negotiations, exchange of discovery, things of that nature. And then as that moves on, then he can decide or not if he wants to set it for a trial setting, depending upon what the offer is to him and based on the evidence that supports the charge against him. Now, in a case like this, again, capital murder, unless they're reducing it down, or to a lesser included offense, I foresee it going to trial. And so this would probably more than likely be a trial case for him. I expect to see that. And so when we look at this, he's being charged with capital murder for hire, like you said, or for some type of financial gain. So the state would have to prove that he was the person that was behind this, orchestrating everything, and that he had something to gain from it. He was, in fact, gaining a financial attribute from it. And so that's really, I think, where the defense counsel will target. How are they able to prove that he was able to gain something from this and that he was, in fact, orchestrating this all along? And so that's where I would see the defense counsel really building the strategy, because that'll be the most difficult portion.
Do you think it would be wise for him being Yella Beezy, to get on the stand and testify in his own defense?
At this time, I'm not going to say that I don't know enough information about the case and what the strategy is and what the evidence that's being presented against him. That's going to be something that I think comes along with time. And as evidence is presented, then they can make a determination of if it's a good idea. A lot of times, it's really a case by case basis. What I would say though, a lot of times we, as defense counsel, we only put clients on the stand when it's absolutely necessary, because if that's the case, then the prosecutors can then ask them a wide range of questions, because now they're on the stand. They can ask them about their criminal history. They can ask them about just things that you may not want to come out on the stand. They now have access to. And so it just really depends on the strategy.
Yeah, because I'm sure you can kind of explain away maybe song lyrics, that being for under First Amendment. But if, investigators are able to pull out receipts about, money transfers or anything like that, not that we know that at this point in the case, but, if they're able to kind of tie that in together, I can see it not going well, especially for Yella Beezy. But do you think the other two men who are also charged in this case could testify against Yella Beezy if this case were to go to trial?
Absolutely. A lot of times the DA's office will put in their offers to co-defendants, and in exchange for their testimony against the main person that they're looking to move forward with a case against, they can put in the offer, in exchange for your testimony, we will reduce your sentence. In exchange for your testimony, we will lower the amount of years that we're offering to you. And that's very much so allowed. And so that's something that can be expected for the other two defendants. And so not something that is unlikely.
And, we're just beginning. We don't even see a trial date set just yet or even a plea in this case. So it'll be interesting to see how this all continues to unfold. And of course, I'll keep you updated, Bridget, have you on again just to get your thoughts on this, especially being from the Dallas area. Bridget, thank you so much for joining me today. I always appreciate it. Before we sign you off, though, I got to ask, where do you think everything goes from here?
The next step is really going to be he has a bond right now of $2 million, and so it doesn't look like he has posted that bond. He's still in the Dallas County Jail, and so the next step would be either him posting that bond, asking for a bond reduction, so maybe having a bond hearing to reduce that bond down, and then moving forward to the pre-litigation negotiation stages.
And $2 million is a lot of money. Bridget, again, thank you
Yes.
so much. And of course, we can't wait to see how this all continues to unfold. But again, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yella Beezy remains in the Dallas County Jail on a $2 million bond. As for Devin Brown and Keywan White, no trial dates just yet for Mo3's murder. Devin Brown is in the Dallas County Jail while Keywan White is in federal detention serving out his gun charge sentence. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.